Welcome to Fearless Females, where ambition meets resilience. Meet your guide, Lorie Jones, owner of Fearless Financial Advisors. Join her and remarkable women executives as they uncover the triumphs and transformative moments shaping extraordinary careers. Ready to be fearless? Let the journey begin.
Good morning, Fearless Females, and thank you so much for joining us again today. I really appreciate all you loyal listeners out there and any of our new listeners that have just joined in because they hear these really great stories and think, hey, if she could do it, maybe I could do that too. So today we're listening to Laura. Laura works with video production and specifically kind of in financial services. And I believe she said she had some space in healthcare as well. But this is actually my least favorite thing in the whole wide world is being on video. I don't love it. You would think as a podcaster, I tell people all the time, I'm just a little bit introverted. Guys, I did not set out to have my own podcast, and I certainly did not set out to see myself on video all the time. But the way that Laura frames it is kind of it's your own brand. It's building who you are. It's showing up authentically. She talks about that being one of the most important things for a young person to hear is make sure that you're kind of leveraging your content around building out who you are. And sometimes that takes, if you go back and listen to some of the other podcasts, it takes like sitting down and understanding what your brand is, doing some deep dive work into who you are and what you stand for. But then she brings this whole piece of video around that brand. And the part that I liked best is she was talking about building authority and brand recognition. She says that you can take to any job, no matter where you go. That's something that's going to follow you or even precede you into your next role. And I think that that's something that maybe the old guard doesn't really understand about today's professional women, is that we're going to be doing a lot of self-advertising, a lot of marketing, a lot of branding around our personal brands. And that's something that's almost, if maybe not more, important than your network, is having your brand that you can carry with you. So I really, really want you to get a lot out of this. And if something that she says strikes you or hits you in the right place and you're like, oh gosh, I really needed to hear that. And guess what? I know another fearless female who needs to hear that too. Share it, pass it on. I want this podcast to just go viral, to get big, because I think that these women have amazing, incredible stories. And you can see that they're real women who are just living their everyday life in amazing ways that influence those around them and you too. So if you find something that resonates with you, pass it on, help out another woman. Thank you so much. And let's get started with Laura. Good morning, Fearless Females. So we are here today with Laura Garfield. She is the co-founder of Idea Decanter, and I'm sure that I've met Laura, and I'm sure that she's got some great ideas for us on video. And since this is an audio podcast in general, I'm hoping that she will inspire me to do video as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Laura. I appreciate it.
Job number one, by the end of this interview, Lorie, let's get you pushing out this podcast on full video on YouTube.
I know. And I bet you run into this all the time, Laura, where people are like, oh, I would do video, but then people would see me. Or I would do video, but I don't actually like looking at myself on video. That's probably one of the biggest things they say, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, note to self, none of us actually like to watch ourselves on video.
Yeah, yeah. I will freely admit that I will come up with those 2-minute clips, and I pay somebody to go through and find the best 2 minutes where I don't sound, dumb and I look beautiful, and then I never watch them. I will put them out there as long as I don't have to see myself. So I bet that's not just me.
I spent 10 years in broadcast news. I was on air, and every time my team sends me a clip of video that I'm in to review before it gets published, I cringe. I don't want to click it. I don't want to watch it. I don't like how I look. I don't like how I sound. I'm getting old. Oh my gosh. So it is 100% natural. In fact, I've heard that A-list Hollywood actors, some of them won't even watch their own films. So maybe that puts it into perspective.
Yeah, so it's not just me. I get that. That makes sense. So, Laura, my first question is always my favorite. I love books so much. I love reading at a 10. What is your favorite book?
Oh my gosh, is it too self-promoting to say my own book?
Not at
I
all.
just dropped Find Your Finfluence this year, and there are many things on my Audible account that I would highly recommend, many things on my bookshelf, but I gotta say my own book. Like,
I love
it's
that.
hard to talk about yourself, but let's do it. Let's own it.
Yes, I love that. So it just, is it kind of, because I actually picked up the book, but it's about, I think now it's closer to 4 until I get to it on my big, huge, major stack of books. So tell me a little bit about it. Does it just talk about how to get started with video, or? Okay.
It's supposed to be inspirational, not aspirational. So making video seem more accessible. It actually wasn't in my roadmap to write a book. I wrote a book several decades ago with my mom about generational differences for women in the workplace. And it was a slog through surveys and data collection and writes and rewrites and co-authoring. And it was exciting, and we got published. But I kind of felt like in life that box had been checked for me and I didn't need to do it again. But last year, back in 2024, I launched an interview series with financial advisors who were killing it in video and wanted to share their secrets with the world. And it was sort of a short form video interview that was supposed to be about 8 minutes. And then the conversation started going longer. And then I thought, well, this is going to turn into a podcast, even though I'm a video person. So we have the 8-minute and the short clip videos and the longer audio podcasts. And then I realized, like, I have so much good stuff here that I should turn this into a book. And so I took all of the tips from these folks I'd interviewed and created this framework for how any of us could do it, how any of us could get our voices out there and kind of our message and add our perspective and our knowledge and expertise to the massive amount of noise that's out there. And it is a framework for doing that in a thoughtful way and in an authority building way. And there are lots of little snippets from folks who have been there and done that who help show you how to do it.
I love that at a 10 because I have looked on the internet for, in fact, I just had a client today that asked me, like, where do I find good information about what different kinds of accounts there are and what different kinds of investments, like good education. They do not educate you in school on investments. Unless you are a finance major, you don't get that basic information. And video is a really good way of putting it forward. But I can't tell you the number of times I've been through like the TikTok black hole and you've got the finance pros telling you what to do about your finances. And I'm like, oh, isn't there any good video that is like informative and interesting, but also not like just bad advice?
Yeah, there is a world, a lifetime times 100 of bad financial advice floating out there on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, and Facebook and LinkedIn. There's so much bad advice that, committing yourself to being that voice of reason is scary. I mean, not all of us want to be on camera, but that's how more and more of us are learning these days and giving people a chance and yourself a chance to get that message out is kind of the whole reason I spent the time writing the book.
Yeah, I love it. I love that you're an accidental author, like,
and an accidental podcaster.
Yeah, that's what I call myself. I'm like, I accidentally did this because I just am so important. I think it's so important to get women's stories out there. So I had to do a podcast, and I didn't necessarily set out to do this. So I think it's funny. We've got that in common. So tell me a little bit, Laura, about yourself. Tell me about how you kind of got started. Like, did you know what you wanted to be at age 5, or did that come later? How did you take the route to where you are today? Just a little bit about you.
Well, my TV news career definitely was discovered in my teens, and I pursued that all through my undergrad and, out into the working world in my first TV news job in Hastings, Nebraska, because you start in small town local TV news and you work your way up. And I did. I ended up at CBS News in New York and then CNN in Atlanta. And that was kind of over the span of a decade. But there was a point in there when I had a couple of kids and my husband's job came to him and said, we need to transfer you to the West Coast. So we were moving from Atlanta to Portland. And I realized like this was sort of the end of the broadcast chapter of my life, because in news, you climb your way up the ladder, but typically you don't go back down to, the local news levels. So when you make it to the network, you don't go back to local. And we were going to Portland, Oregon, and there was really no network option there. And I realized, just like I became an accidental author this time, that I needed to become sort of an accidental entrepreneur, because I had built this strong resume of TV news and it didn't translate very well as I was putting out my resume for jobs outside of broadcast. And so after being frustrated with a job search for about 6 months, I had a very good friend whose husband was getting transferred to the West Coast, and she was sort of in a similar situation. And we got together and we thought, well, let's start a business. And I wouldn't recommend starting the way that we started, because it was with some creative ideas and probably not enough research. We had the chops to know what we were doing in video, but we didn't have the homework. We hadn't done the homework when we decided that the wine industry was going to be our focus. And as it turns out, there are a lot of great visual stories to tell. And there were 800 wineries in Oregon and 900 in Washington at the time. So there were plenty of businesses, but what we didn't know was that most of them were very agricultural kind of businesses, that they were farmers running these wineries. And those farmers didn't have big budgets for video marketing. So as we started making videos about the harvest and the crush and pushing them out and sharing them with the world, some financial advisors I knew and folks in healthcare started reaching out and saying, hey, we're looking into video now too. It was 2014. And so we just said yes, as I think most new entrepreneurs need to. And a year into the business, we took a hard look at the books and said, wow, these wine guys are trying to trade cases of wine for our work, and our financial services clients and our healthcare clients are paying the bills. So how does the mortgage stack up here?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we became, more targeted on industries that fit better. And then as we moved through, we've been in business 11 years now. We continued to niche down and we focus on financial services, which I would recommend for any business owner. With marketing, the more narrow your target, the more you can reach them.
Yeah. As you niche down, you get a really good idea of what their problems are and stuff like that. So it was just the move that was the impetus between like, I can't do this anymore because there's no job for me in Oregon.
Yeah, it really was the move. I mean, I think I'd also hit a point in my career. I had taken a step back in between New York and Atlanta to have a couple of babies. And when you go back to work post kids, it feels different, and you have sort of a different hierarchy of of decision making. And so for me, being an entrepreneur, starting a company gave me the kind of flexibility and freedom that I was looking for as a mom. So it all just, there were enough boxes checked in favor of starting my own thing that that's where we ended up.
And you said you would not recommend doing it the way you did. So let's go back and just talk about that. Like, are there things that you're like, oh, don't do this? Like, I know we were just talking beforehand. You came out with like 3 things that you would have done differently as far as publishing your book. So let's get the nitty gritty. What are the things you would have done differently?
Yeah, the things I would have done differently launching a business. Looking back on it, you get a lot of advice about doing the research and putting together a business plan. And especially if you're a creative, that probably rubs you the wrong way. Like, well, no, let me just pursue this. And I think there should be a balance of both. You have to have the fire and the energy to go for what you see. But if I could have gone back in time and done some evaluation of what are the typical marketing budgets for these mom and pop wineries across the Willamette Valley in Oregon, then I might have said, well, there's really no future potential of building a business that's successful with this as your target audience. And so I might have come to it instead of, in the first 12 or 18 months of the business, we might have done that before we even launched. Would I have realized that there was a need in financial services or healthcare at the time? I don't know. So some of it is also pursuing that creative thing that drives you. Like in those first few years of business, I think it's so important to say yes to as much as you can, because there's, sometimes the universe is guiding you and helping you figure out which direction to go. And then you have to do that full 180 and learn the hard lesson of starting to say no.
Yeah, that is, and it seems to be like you can't skip those steps, in my opinion. Like you have to go through some of those. Some of it you can learn by example, but a lot of it you really have to learn being in the trenches, because you can't learn any other way. You can't get that, and that skill of saying yes and then saying no is hard.
That trial by fire applies to video too. And I talk to people all the time that want to kind of shortcut their way into like being great on camera. And the truth is, just like in business, like the beginning sucks. Your first video is going to be your worst video. And so getting past that and knowing like I have to work my way through this in order to get better. Same applies to being an entrepreneur, I think.
Yeah. What is the best investment you've made in yourself, Laura? If you can kind of look back over your journey, your career journey, the whole, is there something that you've done that you're like, oh my gosh, that made all the difference in my life? I'm so glad I did that.
I would say that my New Year's resolution of 2020 was to have it be my year of public speaking. And so for some people, stepping in front of the camera is terrifying. For other people, stepping up on stage in front of an audience is terrifying. And I fell into the latter crowd. But I knew that the more I used my voice at industry conferences, the more people I could impact. And so 2020 was my year of public speaking. And at the beginning of that year in January, I launched into a public speaking program called Crazy Good Talks and worked my way through some of the curriculum and some of the meetings before COVID totally shut down my year of public speaking. I did have some opportunities later that year to do virtual public speaking, but it really isn't the same as that gut clenching stepping onto a stage in front of an audience that could get distracted easily and look at their phones or yawn and totally throw you off, and you can panic and forget what you're supposed to say. So anyway, I marched through that year and followed the curriculum and really hunkered down and honed that craft. And then moving into 2021, and as the world opened back up, becoming a public speaker never could have happened without the confidence I gained being trained. So if there's anyone listening who thinks, I would like to speak, like, get some support in doing that, because there are tricks of the trade. There are things you should be doing to, catch your viewers or your audience's attention, to market yourself. And those aren't things that you would necessarily know. So save yourself the time and the trouble by finding yourself a good coach.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I've looked at the Crazy Good Talks as well. I think it's funny you said that you're like, either you don't like getting in front of video or you don't like getting in front of audiences. What about those of us who are like, no on both?
That is a hard no.
Yeah. But
well, I think that we are moving as a society from, we all used to love to read, and there has been a shift. And I think it happened around COVID to us watching, and it happens on social media. It's happening on YouTube, where there's something like 5 billion active monthly users. I think the latest stat I read was that we were watching something like 17 hours of video content.
Wow.
A week.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and it is a good point. Like I use video all the time to teach me something or to help me learn something. I feel like sometimes you can get it quickly. If you have somebody tell you or show you, you get it so much quicker sometimes than reading. But I do love reading. So it's a hard thing, right? So what about the worst advice that someone gave you? Can you think back along your journey and figure out, like, what was the worst advice someone ever told you? And did you take it?
I would say that there have been different consultants through the years who have pointed my co-founder and I in a direction that something inside of me was pushing against. And this doesn't get to one specific thing that's been said to me, but more of a feeling inside that this is not in alignment with the direction I think we should be going. And there have been plenty of times where I haven't listened to that inner voice that down the road I wish I had. So I think what I have learned is to give myself the space to really reflect and listen to that. And it does take time. Like it was never natural for me to think, oh, I really know what I'm doing here. I'm an expert, because I wasn't. I was just figuring it out as I went.
Yeah, it really is hard. And I was just going to ask, like, how do you figure out which of it, because there's this whole book called Don't Trust Your Gut, where you're not supposed to trust like that gut intuition. You're supposed to go with the more cerebral or studied response or something like that. But I've heard and found in my own life that sometimes like you should trust your gut. So how do you know when you should and when you shouldn't?
I heard that too once. I was interviewing someone and they said, oh yeah, you should never trust your gut. And I'm not in that camp at all. I think that listening to that quiet voice inside you is really important. And I think that's an advantage that we have as fearless women, as leaders. I think it's an attribute that females bring to leadership that men can't necessarily do. And I will say that it was a dude that said, oh, don't listen to your gut.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never really thought of it along gender lines, but that might be true. Like maybe our gut or intuition works a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. What about a do-over? Like, I have so many of these where I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I could go back and do that again. But is there a situation that you can think of where you're like, if I could do that again, knowing what I know now, I'm going to take all my knowledge back, I would do it differently. And tell me why or how.
I would say we touched on this when we launched Idea Decanter. If I could do over the research that went into our target audience, that would have been helpful. If I could do over my last chapter in broadcasting, I might have chosen to exit a little sooner than I had instead of waiting for circumstances to kind of force that. But I think that in our careers, we invest. I mean, I've got a couple of kids on the path to college that are in high school, and, we're investing more and more every year into their educations, and we invested a lot into our education. So I think that we have this idea that our career needs to be very linear, and the freedom and the courage it takes to make a big detour is challenging. So I think we get kind of caught in this tunnel vision of this is what I've been trained to do and this is where I need to stay. And if I could go back for myself and open up that door a little sooner and say, let's get creative here and figure out how the skills and your passion could be used in a different way, that would have been great.
Yeah, I like that idea because they talk about the genius zone a lot. Mm-hmm. Something that you're really good at, something that you love, and something that the world needs. And where those intersect, you're working in your genius zone. And I'm always curious as to what's my genius zone? Because I like so many different things. And I think that our kids specifically, I've got, 5 in that age range, and they are taught there's one way of doing it, and it's the right way. And you do this first, and then you do this, and then you do that. And the end result is you get this high-powered career that in, finance or whatever it is you want to do, but you have to take these steps in this order to get there. And what you're saying is, maybe we should question that a little bit. Maybe our path is a little bit different or a little bit divergent from that, but it will get us to what we were meant to do, what we were really put on this earth to do a little sooner, working in our genius zone.
There's this quote about at the end of our lives, we have the chance to step around like we've been behind the tapestry the whole time. And we get to step around to the front and see how it all makes sense. It all comes together in this beautiful woven tapestry. And I love that visual. And it's a good one to remind yourself when you're thinking this isn't going how I thought it was going to go. This is all going to make sense at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I hope I get to see that one day, because as you're working behind it, you do tend to think that, well, maybe they know something I don't know. And maybe I should be following this path rather than trying to, bring a little pink and fun into finance. Maybe I shouldn't be trying to do these things. So it's really interesting to think that maybe that does get you to who you're meant to be a little bit sooner.
Bringing the pink and fun into finance. Finance needs it.
I think so. So what about, speaking of finance, if you could give yourself a great big high five for one past financial win, what would that be?
I feel like I have stumbled into success. We have developed some amazing relationships through the years that sometimes pan out into much bigger opportunities than I ever dreamed was possible. So, if I could give myself a high five, and I think in that spirit of zone of genius, what you are good at and doing more of that, it is that I'm a kind of a relationship person and I like to relate to people. And so being able to build relationships and build friendships with people has truly been the secret to the success of our business. And so I guess I just give myself a high five for liking to get to know people.
Yeah. Yeah. That curiosity, that tell me more about yourself, or that I'm so interested in what you do. Building your network. I had one guest a year ago or so tell me that your network is your currency, is your career currency. And thinking of it in that way makes it a little bit more concrete and analytical for those finance people in us. But yeah, that it's interesting that I asked what the best financial decision, and you came with relationships, but it works. That is the best financial decision.
There was, and this is not a financial decision that I made, but there was an advisor I was working with probably 8 years ago who was doing this series called Smart About Money. And so it was all of these foundational things that you could be teaching your kids about money. And she did a piece on your first paycheck. And her advice was save half, set aside half of everything you make from the get-go. And I thought, wow, like my parents instilled some good financial fundamentals for me, but I certainly wasn't saving half. And when I started in TV news in Hastings, Nebraska, I was making $14,000 a year. And the idea of saving half of that would have blown my mind. But I think back on it, and I could have had a roommate instead of paying the full rent and having my own place. There are probably ways that I could have cut corners enough to do that. And it's definitely a lesson that I talk to both of my teenagers about. And in today's world, it's getting harder and harder to save, and everything is so expensive. But if you can set up for success by doing that early, I think it's such an advantage.
Yeah, it is. I remember my youngest daughter coming in and sitting down on my bed when she got her first paycheck, and she asked me, "Mom, so what do I do? Like, how much do I save?" And I'm like, "Well, if you wanted to be really far ahead, you could save like half. You don't have very many bills right now. Like you might be able to do that." And she did. And it set her up for a really strong, a strong financial future. So I love that. But I do want to say that I loved the answer about your network, your currency, your career currency. I think that's really important. So
I also, and my co-founder could tell you this, like have trouble giving myself a high five for much of anything. So that one is a tough kind of curveball question for me.
What scared you the most when you first started out on your journey? Did anything scare you, or did everything scare you? Does it still scare you today? Like, what did you learn about that?
Yeah, we started a business I didn't know much about wine before we launched into that business, though I knew a lot about video. And the same can be said for when we pivoted into finance. I certainly wasn't a math major in college, and I wasn't, focused on econ. And we ended up doing a lot of work in healthcare back then, and a lot of like medical imaging. And I knew nothing about an MRI or a CT before we launched into that. And I just figured it out. And so I think sometimes that's the most important piece of advice someone could hear, is that, you don't have to know it all.
So that's a really good question, because, a lot of times as women, we feel a lot of imposter syndrome. We don't know everything. So it makes us really uncomfortable if we're not fully prepared to answer all the questions. So how did you get through that scared feeling, or that I'm not exactly sure what this means, but I can figure it out. Like, how did you get from I'm scared to death or I'm scared about this to I got this, I'm good?
Is it fake it until you make it? Is that an okay answer?
Yeah.
It is kind of astonishing to realize it creeps up on you that you step into your role and your expertise. And at some point, it kind of just is there with you and you have that confidence you need. And until you get there, you just have to put your head down and focus on doing the best job that you can and, making the adjustments along the way to find more success.
I love that. I actually just wrote an article about that yesterday, that talks about you have to take that first step, that first fearless step. You have to take it without having the ability to know that you're going to succeed.
Yeah.
And the sense of accomplishment comes, and that sense of being good at what you're doing comes later. But that first step, you have to take it when you don't know whether you're going to be good at it.
Just have to dive right in, even if the water's cold.
Yeah. But I will say that through the different interviews that I've given and the different guests that I've met, that a lot of times, even if that step turns out to be a bad one and you fail miserably, you can usually pick yourself back up again. And it usually doesn't determine the rest of your life. So there is something to be said about, hey, this is scary and I am taking this step. But if I fall flat on my face, what's the worst that's going to happen?
Yeah. I mean, it is scary to have the courage to be a complete failure. But knowing that we actually learn more from our failures than we do from our successes is at least somewhat of an encouragement. I mean, that doesn't make those days sting any less, or, those failed business initiatives or even those failed companies hurt any less. But knowing that the only thing you have control over is the introspection of looking at a situation and saying, what can I learn from this? How can I do it better next time?
Yeah. It's that quote. I love that quote. Something's like, try, fail, pick yourself up, fail better next time. Something like that. I probably should look it up because I probably just murdered it. But what about throughout your career journey? Have you run into any unique challenges because you were a female?
I think that's a very interesting question to ask someone with a broadcast background. I don't know if you've spent any time watching the morning show on Apple, but I got a lot of questions from folks I knew once that show came out about, and some of the scandals about what happens kind of behind the scenes in newsrooms. Like, was this your experience? And I don't know if I was in TV news in a sweet spot, but I never really had those moments where I felt like trying to climb the ladder within journalism came with some compromise that would end up in a lawsuit. So luckily, I don't really have those stories to tell. And I mentioned that my mom and I had written a book several decades ago on the difference between the way baby boomer women experienced work and Gen X women. And now as a Gen X female business leader with millennial and Gen Z employees, I think maybe this book needs to be updated because the journey continues. But the experience between what my mom went through and what I have gone through as a Gen X woman is so starkly different. And she was an executive and at one point in finance. And I remember this photo. They went to the Broadmoor in Colorado on a retreat, and there was a leadership photo of 50 of them there. And every single one except my mom was a man in a suit, and she had to wear suits.
Yeah.
with like little bow tie.
Wow.
And her experience as a leader in corporate America was so dramatically different than my career, and the things that the baby boomer women had to do to break the glass ceiling. I just am so grateful for the sacrifices that they made and their perseverance to change the world. And I think about the way we Gen X women are changing the world for our sometimes very touchy-feely Gen Z kids. So I hope at least I can have somewhat of a positive impact in my own company and my own little corner of the world to make a difference.
Yeah. And I too realize that we are carried on the shoulders of those women who did break the glass ceilings, who did, venture out into the workforce and make a spot where now women have the chance to be anything. We really can. There's really not a lot of industries that are closed to us. There may be more that are, more male dominated than other industries, but there's nothing I don't have to tell my daughter, oh, you can't do that because you're not a guy. Right. And what a blessing and hopefully we continue that and leave our daughters in a better place, and then they can just finish it up and fix it for us. Right.
One of the findings of the research my mom and I did was the work that the baby boomer women had done to present to their daughters, like, this is, the world is your oyster. You can do anything. And I was sitting in my later 20s in a newsroom in Omaha, Nebraska, feeling like, I was brought up being told that I could be anything. And man, like, this career is feeling really frustrating to me. And I think what we discovered through our research was that the message that you can do anything is great, but it needs to be delivered with the message that you also have to pay your dues to get there. And so that doesn't mean that the six-figure job is going to land on your doorstep the moment you walk out of college. And unfortunately, I think our new college grads are finding that out the very hard way. But realizing that, like, you can do anything, but there is a lot of work that needs to go into getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that their options are limitless, but you do have to put forth that. You got to take that work. You got to put the work in. You just do. Laura, what is the thing you are most proud of?
I am most proud of building a work-life balance. And I don't think I was cut out to be a full-time mom, because I get a lot of satisfaction out of running a successful business and creating, an environment where people want to work and mentoring people. And I get really excited about working with a team. So I almost need that interaction and that validation, I guess, that comes from, success at work. But being a present mom has been really important to me. And I think it's exciting that we live in a day and age where you can choose a path, where you can, off ramp, which I did for 3.5 years and just did a little freelance work before I on ramped back into my career. But you can choose your own path. And I have done countless hours of work from a laptop sitting at a hockey rink, because I'm a hockey mom, and having the flexibility to kind of show up as a mom in the way that I want and as a business leader has been very, very rewarding for me.
That takes actual work. That is an actual skill set. I'm not so great at it. I do not have that great balance, but I do really admire those that can do that and show the rest of us how it works, how it should be done.
Well, I do think that it's worth putting out there that there's no one pathway to success.
Yeah.
I know many women who have run, 60-hour-a-week careers for decades and are still great moms, like maybe a little less balanced, but, still showing up with their kids in their time the way they want to. So there's some fantastic moms out there who career is not their priority at all. So it's exciting to know that there are many pathways.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it, and it looks right. All of the ways are the right way to do it for you, except for maybe I do tend to work like 20-hour days, and that's not the right way to do it. I figured out.
Self-care, Lorie, self-care.
I know. But I'm still working on figuring out the right way to do that. So, but I will say that, yeah, I agree with you. I think there's a lot of different ways you can come to success as a mom, as an entrepreneur, as a full-time career woman. And I love that women, in my experience, or the ones that I've dealt with through my career, are really open to like supporting that. Like your success doesn't look like my success. We're different and we come at it in different ways, but we can both be proud of each other and support each other and lift each other in being successful in our own ways. And I love that about the cohort of women that we are in right now. It's so fun.
Yeah.
Any advice for a young lady who's just starting down the path that you're so successful at that could help her be successful like you?
I would say that you need to be a broadcaster of your own brand. And this wasn't really a thing when I was in my 20s or my 30s, but realizing that I don't want to say attention in a negative way, but the authority, the brand recognition that you can build in for yourself is something that you can take to any job, no matter where you go. And so I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. That's sort of the platform that is the focus for our business. And when my 14-year-old gets, out of college and into a career, if LinkedIn is still around, I would say, figure out a way that you can build your own authority that is separate from just your job. Because the bigger audience and the more, we're in an attention-driven society. And so the bigger audience that you have, the more reputation that you have, the more valuable that makes you.
Yeah. I like that idea, the personal brand, and watching the new group of Gen Z as they come up. They're good at that. They're actually pretty decent at that, aren't they? They could teach us quite a bit about it, huh?
They sure can. And I am such a huge fan of Sherry Fitz. You and I met at Sherry's conference, and her idea behind owning your personal brand, developing your personal brand, has been inspirational to me. And as a leader of a company and as someone who promotes video marketing, it really took me hearing Sherry's message to give myself permission to say, I don't have to be talking about the company all the time. Like, I can go out and, passionately declare what I know and what I think is important. Aside from the company, it doesn't all have to be about the business.
Yeah. An important message. So thank you so much for just sharing your journey and sharing a little bit about your story and sharing some of your wisdom. And if I have a young lady who wants to talk, ask a question, pick your brain just a little bit, how does she get in touch with you?
A great way would be to find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a DM. I'm Laura Garfield, and it should be pretty easy to pick out the co-founder of Idea Decanter and send me a message. I would love to connect.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Lorie.